Linda.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good morning
Good morning.
or good afternoon, I guess. Yeah. So the
It's 11
recording
o'clock,
is in
right?
progress and we are at noon. So I think I'm going to start the conversation with Mark so that we respect his time and yours and ours, which is probably the most precious commodity these days. So welcome to Author Speak. I'm Linda Maul, founder of Accountability by Design and Readers of the Pack. And Readers of the Pack is just a community for leaders who are readers. It really brings together my passion for my life, which has been growing leaders and reading. And I want to capture the hearts and minds of the emerging leaders today so that they can make a difference in our world. So a warm welcome to the leaders who have joined us and I invite you to save your questions. We will be allowing 10 minutes at the end so that you can ask your questions of Mark, and know that if you don't, I'm going to fill the time with my questions. So Mark's full bio will be available in a PDF. We send you after this Zoom call, and there'll also be details to connect to his website, etc. Because this truly is all about Mark today, not about us. We are actually wrapping up International Coaching Week, so this is our third Zoom event for the week, and we're thrilled to be in conversation with Mark Crowley, author of Lead with Your Heart, Transformational Leadership for the 21st Century. And he is singing my song. So I am a fan. So more than a decade ago, Mark Crowley was the first to assert traditional leadership practices weren't just failing, they were doing great harm. We are currently living the prediction that workers would one day quit organizations if they felt their deeply human needs for feeling valued, respected, appreciated, and personally cared for were not met. And we are absolutely living that right now. Mark's groundbreaking thesis is that human beings are most often influenced by feelings and emotions, and that it's the heart, not the mind, that drives motivation and achievement. With remarkable research and deeply moving and illustrative stories, he proves that leading with an intentional balance of mind and heart has become essential for leaders today. So please welcome Mark.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. I am a fan. Yeah. And I suspect that some of your leaders, some of the people on the call have already read the book, especially when they say, hello, Mark, knowing
Yeah.
you already. But I think the statement very early in the book says it all. It's the heart and not the mind that drives human achievement. Gestures that positively affect the heart naturally and reflexively inspire people to perform. Well, Mark, writing a book is a time-consuming task. I've only co-authored books. It's not for the faint of heart. What is your why in writing this book? Not once, but twice.
It's an interesting question because when I began the process of writing it, my why was more of self-belief, like what you were just saying. This is a challenge to write a book. And am I that person? Could I do that? And since you've read the book, you know my upbringing. And so I was taught that I wasn't worthy of being that person. And so it was actually quite a challenge for me to write it because I had to overcome. I had spent a lot of energy and time and get help to convince myself that, like, you have the ability to do this. And not only that, but you have something meaningful to say. But it was really more, I won't say it was a bucket list challenge, but it was one of, I want to prove to myself that I can do this. But in the process, I had a friend of mine. I had really decided that the book was going to be what became the second half, which is, if you follow these practices that I've perfected, that I've used in my career with great success, you'll be an infinitely better leader. And a friend of mine sitting right where I am having a conversation with him while I'm in the process, he said, you are going to explain why this works, right? And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, well, people are going to think you needed a shitty childhood in order to lead this way. You're going to have to explain this to people. Like you're going to have to give them an explanation for why they should believe you. And I instantly knew like this was like Buddha talking to me, like, like this is a course correction. Like if you don't do this, this isn't going to work. So I was bummed because he was challenging me to go do a whole bunch of more work, but it was in the process of doing the research to validate a thesis that I already knew to be true. That what I ended up finding from a engagement standpoint, from a job satisfaction standpoint, and from a science standpoint, it was so overwhelming that I realized, oh my God, like, and then tying it into my own personal upbringing, my experience, the whole combination reminded me, or actually illustrated to me, that I was actually, I believe I was put on the earth to do that work. Like, this is what I'm supposed to do. But what I didn't anticipate, so I'll tell you a quick story. I had no background in this. I wrote the book. Nobody knew who I was. I'm coming out of corporate America. I had no platform. So I paid this woman $10,000, and her job was to help me identify a strategy for building a platform to get my word out. So she read my book. I'd begun writing for Fast Company at the time. And so she said, okay, I read your book. Very direct woman, as you're going to hear. And I read your articles. I know what you're all about. And I have plan A and plan B. And I said, she goes, you're not going to like plan A, but I like plan A, and plan B is what you're going to want. I go, just tell me what it is you want to tell me. So I hope that if you need, like, you can bleep me out, but this is literally what she said to me for my $10,000. She goes, you're going to fucking fail if you use those words, lead from the heart. I never want you to do it again. Stop using it. You can use it like a Trojan horse. When you go speak, you can bring out the heart at the last minute. And so I had to make a decision. I'm like, am I going to be that guy? And I knew that I had the science. So what she was really alerting me to was, you're going to be met with a ton of resistance, and it would be easier if you just called your book Killer Engagement or something like that. The world's ready for that. They're not ready for this. So it took me, I think, basically 8-9 years. And my publisher called me up one day and said, your book sold more copies last year than it sold all the previous 9 years. And the world is finally ready for this. And we're going to give you 100 days to write a second edition. And I had been marinating in this. I know it took me almost 2 years to write it the first time, but I had been spending so much time looking for more and more evidence that I wrote it in 70 days. And so that's where the second edition came out.
I'm impressed at the 70 days. That just blows me away. But as you say, it is what you've been living for all that time in between. And I think so. You're saying that was 8 or 9, 10 years ago you wrote your first one?
First book came out in 2011, and the new one came out in 22. So 11 years from the first one to the second one.
And just to follow up on that, as a coach, I often will say to my clients, what would happen if you just came with love? And they would say, back then, they would say, Linda, we're talking about work.
Right. Business.
And now they say, oh, what would that look like? So there has been a change in our world around how we feel about bringing our heart to work. So yeah, I'm so glad you did this.
Well, we've had some really stirring events that's happened in those 11 years. Notably COVID. That was the one that I think changed consciousness across the world, where people really took a serious look at their lives and said, am I married to the right person? Am I doing the work I'm supposed to be? Like all those existential kinds of questions. And I think it led people to realize that the work experience was missing a whole lot. right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the good news is that the same people that are leading in the really bad ways are the same people who, in other words, they're part of the universe of people that realize that we can't keep going this way. So
Exactly.
I'll tell you a quick story. I was just talking to a gentleman who asked me to come speak in his company. And he told me, he said, I just want you to know everybody's reading it. And so I said, well, that's really fascinating. Maybe we could do something different. And he goes, well, what do you mean different? And I said, well, we can kind of tailor it to what you're doing in your organization. And I said, is everybody on board with this? And he goes, we had a meeting the other day and the CEO walked in and told the whole senior management team, we need to love our people. And that's my mantra. And I'm like, a CEO saying this? Like, that's insane. Like, because not insane, it's just like, hallelujah.
It's a happy dance.
And it's not kumbaya. It's like just
Yeah.
love your people, like take care of your people. It's like so simple, but the resistance to this has just been astonishing. And I have a friend of mine, she said, if you knew in 2011 that it was going to be this uphill and that you'd be met with so much resistance and, misinformed, ill-informed, not informed, would you have persisted? And I probably, I like to tell myself that I would, but this hasn't been easy by any means.
No.
People really dismissive on this. And
And
so,
we're not entirely there either.
no, we're not.
Not there yet.
No, my joke is, I want a parade to be thrown for me, and I want it to be thrown while I'm still alive. I'm kidding, but you know what I'm saying. you know, it's like I want the world to recognize that this is the normal, and the
Yeah.
way we've been doing it is forever is not normal.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think, from my understanding, lead from the heart is really caring about people in a way that supports their fundamental needs. But how would you describe to lead from the heart, maybe with a story that you've experienced in the work that you do?
I think it really comes down to people say to me, well, this sounds like a golden rule book. And I'm like, no, it's actually a platinum rule book because instead of managing people the way we think we would want to be managed, it's really sitting down with people and finding out what they want, what do they need, because everybody's different. So, for example, I remember managing somebody and she had a baby and she was taking her baby to daycare and she started coming in late. And you could see she was harried. It was stressful and she was embarrassed by being late. And I knew she'd had a baby. And so I said, well, what's going on? And she goes, just so much traffic. And I said, well, what would happen if you came in an hour later and figured out a way to just keep your work up? Would that work for you? And she was like crying, was so grateful. So she shows up at 9. I'm making it up. I don't remember what time we started, but 8 o'clock, everybody else, 9 o'clock, this person. So what do you think happened? People coming to me saying, why is she coming in at 9? How come I don't get to come in 9? And I said, I'm helping her. I'll help you with what's going on with you. That doesn't necessarily mean to accommodate when you come in, but if I can support her in when she needs this, then I can count on her to perform to the expectations that I have. So rather than just go out to everybody and say, this employee's coming in at 9, so everybody can come in at 9. In my conversations with people, it was like, what can I do to support you? I had people that wanted my job, so help them figure that out. Coach them, develop them, give them those opportunities. Not everybody wanted that. Some people just wanted to stay put, but there are still other ways of supporting people. And so I think people, and I use the language scaled mountains for me because they could feel I cared about them and I demonstrated it to them. It's like, what do I have to do to help you in a way that will make you feel more committed, supportive, and
Yeah.
able to do your job? Simple as that.
Yeah. It sounds so simple, but
I mean, you
challenging.
have to care and you have to be willing to invest the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it can be a bit exhausting to do that.
Mhm.
But the thing is that as I'm getting longer in the tooth here, and I wrote this at the end of my book that I don't remember any of the goals that we met or the records that we broke. I
Yeah.
don't remember what the numbers were. I simply don't. They were important at the time, But what matters to me is people that work for me 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years ago are still in my life and still
Mhm.
value how I help them. That's more sustaining than, well, we had record profit the first year I was in. Okay, that's important and it helped me, but so is the legacy. And I don't mean legacy. I really mean just in the midst of your life, helping people, not
Mhm.
just exploiting people and thinking that
Mhm.
they're there for your, to serve you and your whims.
Now, I bet many of those people remember you more than they remember other leaders too, because I know who my favorite leader was, and he lived this. He lived it. He led like this 40 years ago. Like he was an amazing
Don't you
man.
think that if we all reflect on the best manager we ever had, that they kind of share
The
these,
same,
right?
the
Right. So
same.
it's sort of peculiar, right? That we
Yeah,
wouldn't replicate that. Well, it worked for me. It was great for me. This
yeah,
is the best. But that's not what we've done. We
no,
kind of buy into the party line, which is, you got to whip these people and you got to
yeah.
keep an eye on them and micromanage them, all that.
That culture really plays a part, right? That the culture from the top down really plays a part. So if you were mentoring the leaders out there who are trying to hire today and retain those star employees, which is really a challenge, how would you suggest they start thinking or behaving as someone who leads from the heart?
I think
Practical, relevant
I
stuff.
think you have to ask yourself, do I care about people? Do I care about their growth, their success, their well-being? So ask yourself that question because we know there's data that shows that basically only a third of all people on the planet have an orientation which includes other people, right?
Mhm.
So it's all about me, it's my career, my money, my bonuses, all that kind of stuff, and you just become a tool for that.
Yeah.
That's not the kind of leader that we want. So if you can't convince yourself that other people are just as important as you in this equation, then leadership really isn't for you. I mean, I really, so like make that decision because everything that I'm advocating for has an orientation towards supporting people and what they need. And we know what they need. They need growth. They need appreciation. They need encouragement, which literally means to give heart to people. Like that's no coincidence. They need to feel included, to a sense of belonging. These things are not rational. All of these affect us emotionally. When we feel included, when we feel appreciated, when we know that our manager is interested in growing us and giving us opportunities to learn, and not just specific to, if I'm making this up, but if I'm a knife sharpener, it's not, hey, we're sending you to advanced knife sharpening school, and it's going to be, graduate level knife sharpening. It's like broaden the whole person. Why would I want to do that? They're just a knife sharpener because this is what makes people feel like I matter as a human being, not just as a knife sharpener. I've never used that metaphor before, and it's nuts, but it's the idea that I only want to invest in what I'm going to get something out of. That is the flawed thinking. It's invest in people because it's the right thing to do. And in response to that, what I have found is that people naturally respond in the way that you would like them to. But there's a win for them. It's not a win-lose, it's a win-win.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think of Simon Sinek's why, right? We need to connect to something real in our hearts. So I'm going to open this up to questions because, yeah, we only have 10 minutes left already. But does anybody have a question? Just
I have
stick
a
up your hand.
question.
Laura?
I just want to say to Mark, thank you for getting me through COVID because I discovered your podcast and then I discovered you. And it was such a tough time, I have to tell you. I was leading a sales team with a large organization, really loved my job, my people. But of course, we were all going through those changes, right? Um, with that said, just going back to what you had just referenced to ask yourself if you like people. uh, how, from your perspective, how does an organization ensure that they're attracting and hiring the right people into that culture and not the leaders that aren't a fit? Like, what would, in your mind, what could we all be doing as leaders to ensure that we're getting those individuals that
So
are?
I say there's a few things. That the first one is that when you're interviewing somebody for a leadership role, and I forget where I learned this. It may have been Adam Grant, but it may not have been. But basically, it starts like, so I say to you, Laura, in your experience of managing people, have you ever helped anyone grow from where they started into something more significant? In other words, you've helped them by getting them promoted into a bigger role. Have you ever done that in your career? And of course, anyone in a job interview is going to go, well, of course, I've done brilliantly in this regard. And once you get that, it's sort of like the hook. You say, "Oh, can you? This is wonderful. Great. I'm really excited to hear. Tell me the names of the people and then what you did specifically to help them." And that's where you will trip some people. They're not going to have a story because they don't have a story. Well, I sent them to class and if it doesn't feel like they did something meaningful and significant, some people just come to work and they do great work and they get promoted just because they're great, not because the manager did anything to help them. So if you're not getting a story where you're like, you know what, that you really did help that person, that's compelling and that's what we're looking for. If they don't have a story, I don't think I would want to hire them. That's a big one, right? But then there's all the managers that we have in place right now. And so I've always believed that we should monitor, measure turnover at the manager level, right down to the manager level, and report it out so that people can see. Because I used to tell this to my managers all the time. It's like if you have low turnover, if people don't leave your team, it's a complete reflection of you. And if you have high turnover, it's a complete reflection of you. So either way you want to go. So if you start to see that there's just this trend where it's just like in and out, you've got a problem. And maybe you can fix it through coaching. But if you can't, if it just continues, you've got to move that person out of a leadership role. I think that's huge. We're heading into, I believe, no, I'll throw another piece in there. Google, I went to Google and spent the whole day there with their talent management people. And one of the things that I learned that they did was they routinely send out a 1-question quiz or, probe, if you will, pulse check. Would you recommend your manager to other Googlers? And it's so simple and so brilliant. It's one question, it's binary. And you do it anonymously, so you're getting a scorecard for every manager in the company. So if all you did was went to the bottom 20, and I'm not an 80-20 guy, I'm just saying if you were to just do that and say individually go meet with those 20 people on the bottom and find out what's limiting them. If you can fix them or replace them, you could transform an organization just based on the fact that people don't want to recommend you. That's not a good sign. You need to be able to develop people, you need to be able to accomplish your goals, big goals, challenging goals, while at the same time having people respect how you're leading them and feel that they're getting what they want. I think that question is fantastic for this reason. Like it validates it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is if you're a good manager, you're going to go, I didn't like that score, so I got to figure out how I'm going to get there. So you can correct behavior that way.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great question, Laura. And I didn't introduce Laura. Laura was the one who introduced your book to me initially. And
Thank you,
she
Laura.
also is my co-pilot on this Author Speak series. So thank you, Laura, for all of that and the question. Yeah. Do either Kiyomi or Shanta have a question? You were
I
first.
have several, but I don't think there's time for all of them because I want to dig deep. Like, I'll just say, Mark, I just like everything you said today just speaks. So my head almost rocked off my neck just from nodding. And it's just inspiring to have somebody out there that's saying the same things that just speak to me. So, and what I want to accomplish with my business and in my practice. So thank you.
Thank
Is
you.
there one small one that you could ask?
The one that came up for me was, what was the biggest resistance or pushback feedback that you heard when you first published? What was the real big like pain point resistance for readers or for the feedback?
So you know what the title of my book is, yes? Well, look at the title and pick one word that you think might have been the problem.
Right. I know that you spoke to
Right?
that earlier. Was there more specific of why it wouldn't
No,
work,
it's
or
just
it was
it's
just
just that
resistance in general to the concept?
heart is like kryptonite. It's like we think, the more you care about people, it's going to backfire. They're going to take advantage of you. They're going to get soft around the middle. We don't bring heart into leadership. We actually, leave your troubles at the door. That's another kind of mental thing that we've done. And so I was hired to speak at Amazon when Jeff Bezos was still the CEO. And about 24 hours before, they called me up and they said, you know what, we decided we're not going to have any external speakers. We're only going to have our own team speaking. So sorry, you can't come. And then a couple of years later, Microsoft called and said, we'd like to have you speak. It was during COVID, actually. And could you speak? And the person that asked me if I would speak had another person on the call, and the other person said, hey man, have you ever met with any resistance on this? Like, do people think this is crazy what you're talking about? And I go, yeah. I have the suspicion that when I got killed off at Amazon, that it was because somebody thought that this was a weak and sentimental and stupid thing. The other guy who I didn't realize, who's now at Microsoft, was the guy at Amazon. And he goes, you're right. He goes, my boss came in and said, tell me about the speaker. And he goes, his name is Mark Crowley. He wrote this great book. It's called Lead from the Heart. And the guy goes, screw that. We're not bringing that guy in. No, I'm not kidding. He goes, we need somebody who knows how to drive performance. And what, I'm just going to speak in the vernacular. What really pissed me off about that was if they had just looked at my history, they would have seen that this guy knows how to drive performance. That's all
you led teams,
right?
Yeah.
Yes, And one last thing about this that you might find fascinating. So I come out of financial services. I went into the brokerage side of the business and took the business to record level profit and revenue. My first year, I was named leader of the year. I left. About a year later, I wrote the book. And when the book came out, the people that I used to work with were like, oh man, what happened to him? Did he have some spiritual breakdown or something? I'm not kidding. And I'm like, I'm the same guy. I haven't changed. It's just me. It's just, and I'm like, this was my first hint to your question of how much resistance there was going to be to this because it was just instinctive. That's stupid. I don't even care what another word you're going to say. And so I started writing articles for Fast Company, and I literally started the podcast so that people can listen and go, that guy's not crazy after all. So it's all instinctive. It's misinformed, but it's very much been real.
Thank you. Because I know I ran up against a bit of it too. So I'm just, did you, sorry, second,
You're great. It's great.
Told you there was going to be several questions, but did you find that, was your approach to just kind of go, okay, or was there any discussion that would follow, or you just kind of, it's not for you, and just let them be?
What I learned in this whole thing, and so you now have the grounding of it, was that nobody who worked for me, I think people who worked for me kind of got it more than the people who worked around me. I was admired because I got performance. I was admired because of the impact that I had on people. It didn't matter what team I took over. They always did well. And it was long enough in the company for people to go, that guy knows how to lead. What they didn't do was to look under the hood and say, how is this happening? What's he doing that's unique, right? So when the book came out and they see the title, they hadn't been able to grasp what I was doing. And then they saw the title and they go, well, that couldn't have been it. They just didn't understand what I was doing. They just knew the outcome. So the book revealed what I was doing. And obviously plenty of people now have figured out that, this is all very sane. my best advice to you would be, don't tell people what you're doing. Just do it,
Mhm.
right? Don't go, well, I'm leading from the heart here, or I'm a heart-led leader. Don't do that. It's, you know what I mean? That's just like, that will get you into trouble. Just care about people and let people respond to the way that you're caring for them.
Mhm. I think
Yeah.
that's great
Thank you.
advice.
Thank you.
And
Sorry, I
model
didn't
it.
want to take over too much.
Well,
Thanks, Tammy.
it's interesting because this is the third, we've had about 7 of these. I think this is the third call where somebody has said we need 45 minutes. Like we're running out of time. I have one question because I am always interested in what people are passionate about, Mark. And so I saw you're a member of Marshall Goldsmith's 100 Coaches. I actually put my name in the ring for that at one point in time, wasn't successful. But that's a man who's extremely passionate about growing leaders and coaches and gives freely. Are there any passion projects or events in your future that excite you and bring out the passion for you?
Well, interestingly, my newest podcast came out this morning, and I recorded it yesterday. And my guest was Marshall, and
Oh,
we talked about the wisdom he's acquired in 75 years because he just
oh
had his
wow.
75th
What
birthday.
an
So,
honor.
so very interesting and coincidental. You know, this is all consuming what I'm doing, right? So everything that I'm doing is derivative of advancing these ideas. And Shanta wrote a book about, that's aligned to this. And she will know that there's a huge audience of people that are desperate for this information, but are working in environments that are saying this is not the right way.
Mhm, mhm,
And so every moment of my day is spent trying to figure out some unique way of conveying a message. Part of it is, for example, just who I pick on my podcast. So I'm picking people who are doing really significant research, writing really important books that advance the narrative and get people to understand that, wait a minute, like that's Amy Edmondson. He's a Harvard Business School professor. They're teaching that at Harvard. So like so I'm trying to do that, and it's difficult to, spend the time to read their books and digest them and put the notes together and invest that time so that when I'm having a conversation, I'm not just going, so what made you write the book? And, like you're asking intelligent questions and you're digging into it so my audience can basically get moved, like changed, altered, having their perspective and their consciousness changed. So that's Marshall is not only older, but he's established. He's
Yeah,
had people, he's written books that people don't resist. They're like, that's great.
yeah.
I'm having to overcome all this inertia. And so that's really where my life is right
That's
now.
exciting. It's very exciting. And we're on the same journey for sure. So feedback would be welcome after this is over around the questions we asked you today. So, but I want to wrap it up just to be cognizant of the time for
Sorry,
everyone.
Linda, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Shanta did have a question, and I just wanted to ask Mark.
Okay.
I'm fine. I'm not going anywhere. So,
Okay, great.
okay.
Shanta,
Keep going.
do you want to unmute for us? And let's hear your lovely voice. There you go.
So, today the topic that everybody is talking about is AI, right? So I wanted to have your opinion on whether you think AI can help people do a better job of leading with their hearts, or you think totally they shouldn't even be looking at.
I think it's very early in the game, if you will, with AI, right? So it just sort of exploded. And I saw some statistic that said that the majority of us have already embraced it and have already figured out a way to use it. And so like I'll have an idea and I'll just type in something on Chat GPT and it stimulates it quickly. And I'm like, I'm grateful for that. That's very cool, right? So all of that is very harmless and time saving perhaps. But I also don't think it's all that great, to be honest with you. It's not that comprehensive. The ideas are articulated in a very weird way. So it's more like, here's something to think about versus here's the final answer.
Right.
But as this advances, my fear is that companies are going to go, what do we need Shanta for anymore? Like,
Right.
what, right? What do we need her for when we can have this? So the trend right now in the technology world, particularly, and I hate to say this, but Microsoft is one of them. Google is the big offender, but they're not alone. They've decided, and Amazon, they've decided to just make layoffs routine. And they're doing it in waves. And the CEO of Google said, we're taking our time to do it right. And I'm like, do it right. Like you're trying to perfect layoffs. Like
I know.
so when you have the temptation of technology that's going to, we can look at it from 2 points of view. One is this technology is going to enhance people's productivity, right? So right now they're saying just with ChatGPT and some other simple automation that people are saving like 6 or 7 hours a week. That's great. The leader who comes from the head is going to go, when it gets up to 30, we're letting these people go.
Yeah.
The
Right.
one who's coming from a balance of mind and heart says, we're giving these people new tools that will make them infinitely more
Exactly.
productive. Let's align it that way.
Yeah.
And, based on what I'm seeing right now with the technology firms and how they're masterminding layoffs, I'm really worried that that's their strategic plan. And we already know Jeff Bezos has like hundreds and hundreds of robots working in so his dream is to eliminate all the people that work there. And that's why they treat them like robots. That's why people say they can't afford to live and they're sleeping in their cars when they work there. If the Jeff Bezos of the world and that mentality influences AI, we're all screwed.
Mhm.
And so I think we need to be the voice for saying, this should be just like Microsoft Word and Excel was. We didn't lay anybody off when we gave them Word. We gave them tools to be able to be more productive. And
Right.
I
Right.
have no idea which way it's going to go. All I can say is, do the right thing.
Yeah. I'm very optimistic. I think people will figure it out. People will figure out that, mindlessly using AI is not the thing to do. But you mentioned something which I really liked, which is, leaders who have the balance will acknowledge that there is a lot of productivity to be gained, and they will give those tools to the humans, and the humans will be the ones who will make everything work. So I like that.
And I believe that. I
Yeah.
really do believe that. But we have to, we're
Keep our
seeing
fingers crossed.
people are using AI to hack into people's accounts. They're using it for bad. And so we're doing, but I think we all need to be a voice for it when we're being exposed to it. Are we doing it ethically? And I know Microsoft has a whole, guidelines. It's just, will they stick to the guidelines? Will they be seduced into, we could save $100 million if we got rid of all these people and we just brought it, and there's going to be people sitting at the board going, I say, let the people go, and if we start to do that on a wholesale basis, we've really
We're in
missed the
trouble.
plot.
Well, thanks for that answer.
You're very welcome. Great question.
And thanks for that question, Shanta. And I think it is about keeping the conversation going, right? Asking that question often and engaging people in conversation about it so that we keep the awareness there that there are benefits and there are challenges and there are huge risks. And so how do we keep that conversation alive so it's balanced? So thank you for that question. Yeah. And if you're okay, Mark, I have one other burning question that I'd
Please
like to
go.
ask because it was on my list, but I was afraid we wouldn't have time. So I was coaching a young leader yesterday who works in an organization where the senior leadership do not lead with heart. and she does. But she doesn't, she wants to influence the other leaders at her level, hoping that that's going to push up in the organization. Like she's a powerhouse. So how would you recommend, what strategies would you recommend she start with? How does she hold that and bring others into that mindset?
So I think you know this as a coach that you get excited. Let's say an employer calls you up and says, Bill Smith could really benefit from some coaching, and I think you're the right person, and we really want to help Bill. He's a good guy, but he's kind of struggling. And you go, this is perfect. This is what I do. I can't wait. And so you start talking to Bill, and Bill is like this, right? I can't hear you. And so you kind of figure out that I'm not going to be able, no matter how good I think I am as a coach, I can't get through to this person. There's no point in this, right? And Marshall and I actually had this conversation yesterday. It's really, truly pointless. Now, I'm not the kind of person. I'm the guy who, like, in this scenario, I'll come in from a backside, or I'll figure out some other way to try to influence this person. Like, just trust me, give me 60 days. Let's see what we can do. But you can get to the end of the 60 days and still have some people who are just going to resist. They don't see the need. They don't see the value. They're threatened by it, whatever. And you have to be able to go, God bless you. Off you go. Find somebody else because this isn't working. And my setup here is to say that we should not be setting out an ambition of changing the managers around us. Our premise should be to lead people in such a compelling and wonderful way that the people who work for us will be the ones who influence the people around us. So I just love working for Mark Crowley. He's so different than anybody else. Oh, really? Like, what's he do? And so, they're picking up little breadcrumbs, and that's how they'll be influenced. So rather than have the ambition of trying to change the world, just make sure you take great care of your team and lead the way you believe is the right way, and let it bubble up. I kept getting promoted. Nobody ever asked me what I was doing, but they just kept going, that guy knows how to lead. He knows how to get results. Nobody cared. But I don't know that I hate to say this, but in all those years that I was there, the only people who I influenced to lead from the heart were the people who worked for me, because they could feel it work and they were like, I want to lead like this myself. People around me who competed with me thought they had the right strategy, and it was all mind driven and control people and all that kind of stuff. I wasn't going to be able to persuade them, so I just didn't try.
It's interesting. I appreciate that. That was where we went with the conversation, was how do you show up authentically yourself? And that's where the magic is. But she's going to be listening to this recording. She couldn't be here today, but she'll be listening to the recording.
Great.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And I do think we need to wrap it up. And even though I've read versions of this before, one of the quotes that you made in the book really stays with me. And you mentioned it again at the beginning of this call, but it is the why. Long after you remember the actual work or the targets you met along the way, what sustained in your memory is the effect you had on people's lives. By this one measure, above all others, you'll know the true impact you had as a leader. And for me, that's where the magic is. So thank you, Mark, for so graciously sharing your time, your wisdom, and we wish you all the success in the months ahead. We'll be cheerleaders forever.
No, I love you for that. Thank you very, very much. This has been fun, and I appreciate it. And I like being with like-hearted people. Thank you.
Thank you to our listeners and our contributors. We only are successful if you join us and are fully engaged. This is our passion. So if you want to dig deeper and go beyond reading the book, we actually are going to host a leadership learning lab using this book, because I am convinced we can influence others just by starting the conversation. So thank you, and visit our Readers of the Pack. That's all the marketing you're going to get. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Just enjoy the weekend ahead. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.